dig in and get started. The debate will be underway shortly. Before we actually let the fabulous student debaters do their thing, we just wanted to kind of set up, give some context, and make sure that everyone knows what's going on. So welcome to the Great Fair Trade Debate. My name is Sean Murray. I teach the first year writing course, which my section of the course happens to be themed around writing for social justice, which is how I originally became introduced to the idea of fair trade. Just a quick show of hands. How many people have bought something with a fair trade logo on it? Bananas, coffee, chocolate. Okay, there are a few hands that are up. I think there was a hand up over here. Can you tell us your name?
Lauren.
Lauren.
Yes.
Besides maybe the cool logo, was there anything else that prompted you? Was it a conscious decision to buy fair trade?
It was, I used to go to the University of San Francisco, and that's the social justice university, so there was a lot of products on campus and off campus that promoted fair trade. So
what does that mean to promote fair trade? Like, what does fair trade boil down to for you?
For me, well, it boils down to me being a more conscious consumer, knowing where my money's going to, and that I'm buying a product that has been made by people that are getting a good deal, that they're not getting the short end of the stick. So that's why I'll go for fair trade. I took a class on food, on culture and food, and they showed a lot of documentaries with farmers. So after that, I was like, well, I want the farmers to get a good cut from whatever product I'm buying. So that's why I would go for fair trade. But I soon found out that not all products that were marketed as fair trade are indeed fair trade. So
Lauren?
yes.
So thank you for that. We just wanted to start with kind of a quick definition or explanation of fair trade, and Lauren did a great job of starting us off with that. If you're new to fair trade, this is a big classroom, I hope people can see. Fair trade ensures consumers that the products they purchase were grown, harvested, crafted, and traded in ways that improve lives and protect the environment. My guess is our student debaters may get into finer details at some point, so I don't want to steal anyone's thunder. This kind of definition of fair trade is actually taken from the website for fair trade campaigns. You may have noticed that I, as well as a couple of our student debaters up front, are wearing fair trade campaigns t-shirts. So what is that all about?
Beautiful, man.
Well, if you saw our flyer, it was designed by a student, I want to give a quick shout out, who maybe couldn't make it today. But the motion that is being debated is this: should St. John's University become a fair trade school? Which may seem confusing to many, because usually we're used to seeing fair trade logos on bananas or coffee or chocolate. What does it mean to have fair trade connected to, in this case, a university? Fair Trade Campaigns is a nonprofit group out of the Bay Area in California. And basically what they do, they designate institutions or locations as being fair trade friendly. In the case of colleges and universities, they have 5 goals that they want schools to work towards to become fair trade designated. St. John's has achieved 3 of the 5 goals. The things we're doing well on includes having events, educating about fair trade in the classroom, having fair trade coffee, for example, at departmental meetings. The things that we haven't quite worked out, one is making sure that there's ample fair trade products at our various vendors on campus, whether that's down below here in DAC or in Marillac. Actually, the bar is very reasonable. They just want 2 fair trade products at every vendor, and for it to be labeled so students know what they're buying. And then the final thing that we're working towards is having the St. John's administration considering writing kind of a loose commitment to fair trade and having that live on the website. So that's what some of us are working towards. There's obviously a debate here. There's going to be some questions and some challenges to the idea of a university becoming fair trade, as well as maybe just fair trade in general. So with that, maybe some quick thanks, and I want to hand things over. I wanted to say thank you to all of you for showing up, whether it was for extra credit and or fair trade. I want to thank Campus Ministries and CRS, Catholic Relief Services, which we'll hear from a little bit later. I want to thank Academic Service Learning for making this happen, the professors that brought their students, and a big shout out to Dr. Steve Bono and the Debate Society for kind of organizing this and really making this happen. And with that, I think I'm going to hand things over to Steve, who's kind of set up the actual debate.
All right, thanks, Professor Murray. Thank you all for coming and using your common hour in this the season of endless debates. I feel like I have to do lots of repair work to the thing I love after you get people like Tim Kaine and Mike Pence and Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton using every ounce of their soul to screw up the art I love on a regular basis. When you think of a debate, you have to think in terms of the opposite of that. That is not a debate. It's named that way. It has the same similarity to debate as your daily commute does to NASCAR, and the same risks to your safety involved. What a debate is here at St. John's, I'm the director of the Debate Society. I've been here about 9 years. I'm a professor in the Department of Rhetoric, Communication, and Theater. And what debate is practice in the use of rhetoric to discern what we know and what we don't know in order to help us make decisions when the amount of information we have about that decision is not ideal. We don't have perfect information when we talk about politics, social justice, social issues. Debate helps us identify our weaknesses as well as our strengths. And that's why this fair trade topic is the perfect venue for debate. Because it can help us figure out where we need to go research and study more, and whose voices are not being included and whose are maybe over-determining the scope of the discourse in it. So let's talk a little bit about how this debate is going to go. We have two sides that have been chosen sort of arbitrarily, because in debate, we separate the skill of debate from personal commitment. So what side are you guys? Are you opposition? So proposition, they are for St. John's being designated a fair trade campus. Or is it fair? Yeah, designated? Okay. I've learned a lot through studying this. It's like being a debate director, being a debate professor means you're a perpetual student. And then opposition, they are against St. John's becoming a designated fair trade campus. The speakers will take turns, and they'll speak for about 6 minutes each. Somebody might be keeping the time. I might volunteer Emilio to be the timekeeper back there. So at the end of the first minute of the speech, Emilio, as the timekeeper, will make a knock. Louder. Yeah, like that. That signals to the debaters that questions are appropriate. So I'll demonstrate this with Amber here. So I might be speaking as a debater, and if during that speech after the knock, if she wants to ask a question, she can do so simply by standing up and trying to get my attention. I don't have to take her. I can wave her down. The floor is mine. But if I wanted to, I would say, your point, your question. She has about 20 seconds to say something, make an argument, ask me a question, something like that. And that's how it works. That's how we have interaction in the debate. Speakers do not have to take any points if they don't want to. Normally, they might do it to demonstrate their skill or their comfort with the arguments at hand. We'll go back and forth until the end of the debate. We'll have plenty of time for your comments and questions. As a debate adjudicator or debate critic, it's very important that you take notes, and it's very important that you're able to identify individuals or teams with particular lines of argumentation. Did they present good evidence? Did they have a clear line? Did they explain what they meant? And you also want to take note of what's being left out. It might strike you that an argument you think is central to the debate didn't come up among the speakers. That might be something you want to talk about at the end. And that way it advances all of our understanding of debate. One final word is that the format of debate we do is European in nature, it's British in nature, and it involves what we call heckling, which is, you might have heard this when I came up here from some of the more seasoned debate people. If you're in an argument you like, you're encouraged to knock on the table in support of it. We can all practice that right now, yes? Very good. So if someone says something you really like, you bang on the table. Some people get really into this. But, no drum solos, you're not auditioning for Metallica or anything like that. But if you hear an argument you don't like, the most powerful thing to do is stay completely silent. Because now everyone knows that you can knock if you like something. So this becomes incredibly embarrassing to speakers when they're like, and my best point is da-da-da, and everyone's like, oh no, I'm doomed. It's going to be really bad. So that's the best thing you can do. If you really like what someone's saying, you could say here, here, if you wanted to. This is a parliamentary government model. It comes from this type of debate that we do is derivative of things they do in the Oxford Union, which is an old student organization that has lots of public debates. So, with that, I don't think there's anything else to do except to start the debate by inviting the first speaker to come up and make the case for why St. John's should become a fair trade designated campus. You're here.
Hi, I'm Donna. So, today we will be talking about fair trade and what it stands for. But most importantly, we will be asking all of you why you feel it's necessary and why we think it's necessary to make an important change in St. John's University. We are here to choose whether or not we want to be a part of this movement, which stands for helping those who can't help themselves. We believe that fair trade stands for helping those who can't help themselves. I think that St. John's also believes this. The organization called Fair Trade Campaign is an organization that designates schools, universities, towns, and congregations. And what they do is they label these universities and all these institutions this because they practice fair trade and they advocate for fair trade to educate everybody involved. An institution such as a university is important and is very influential in student lives. To become a mindful student, to become a mindful citizen, it's important to have these kind of organizations be a part of the university. And St. John's is a great example of a university that works towards social justice. In fact, in the university's own mission statement, it says, wherever possible, we devote our intellectual and physical resources to search out the causes of poverty and social injustice and to encourage solutions that are adaptable, effective, and concrete. A lot of fair trade certifiers and organizations, this is also their statement. This is also their mission. So they work towards this, and they want to make this a huge movement, which is already a huge movement all across the world. It's not just in the United States, it's an international movement. St. John's, however, is already well on its way to becoming fair trade designated. It's not an impossible endeavor. As Professor Sean already explained, we started this campaign about 2 years ago, and we have already completed 3 of the 5 steps and are well on our way to completing a 4th step. Catholic Relief Services as well is a big supporter of this movement with its own committee, and it helps spread the word of fair trade and what it stands for. And what fair trade stands for is to promote equality, to promote fair working conditions, equal pay, and an overall better life for those workers who are marginalized. These workers, it doesn't matter if they're here in the United States working in a manufacturing plant or in Ethiopia farming coffee. Everybody should be able to experience a good life. And in St. John's, we believe in this. Therefore, why not become a fair trade designated university? There are universities already across the United States that have become fair trade designated. This isn't something that's new. And so some of these universities, a lot of them actually are Catholic universities, because what Catholics as important, which is to serve those in need, correlates really well with what fair trade also stands for. A couple universities that are already fair trade designated are DePaul University, Fordham University, Villanova, and Manhattan College. And a great example is DePaul University. They're one of the few Vincentian Catholic universities, and they've been fair trade designated for over 4 years now. So with this, we should take into account St. John's role, and we should try to work towards becoming and advocating and educating our students about fair trade so that we can practice what we preach.
Thank you very much for that speech, and now I would like to recognize the first speaker from the opposition side to open their case. You're here.
My name is Jerez, and yes, I do agree with Angelica that I agree that we should be focusing on our moral and Vincentian base which the school's laid on, but it's just not practical to install fair trade organizations into this school. First, it depends a lot on consumer social responsibility. It plays such a large factor and it's very uncontrollable. We're asking people to basically support fair trade and, well, in an experiment in Sydney, I'll quote right from here from the conductor themselves. One experiment we undertook in investigating whether or not the ethical consumer exists took place in a coffee shop in central Sydney over several weeks. The coffee shop displayed a large and prominent sign indicating the products available with prices and active specials. To this we added quite obtrusively that although special indicated that all of it was fair trade coffee, no extra charge. Unprompted, with the only sign to notify them of the availability, less than 1% of people actually bothered to ask what fair trade coffee was or bothered buying it at all. They went ahead and just bought their normal coffee like a typical day and went on with their lives. It just seems that most people aren't interested in purchasing fair trade products. We're so consumed with all the different things that we have to do throughout our day, with work, with sleep, with all those different things, that who really has time to focus on this as much as we should focus on it? And when they tried being more upfront in people's faces about it, they got a higher rate of people supporting fair trade, but now people were also getting pestered and annoyed. And though they were informed about fair trade, nobody really wanted to focus on it. People would rather get on with their lives and go. And now we have to remember, this is normal adults who we're serving. We're talking about college students on this campus. And college students are in that strange phase that it's like a transitional phase from sort of being a teenager to being an adult. If adults seemingly don't even want to purchase this fair trade coffee, how can we even ask college students to do the same? It just doesn't seem like a practical case. The other problem that I find with fair trade is just that for buying fair trade, just to name a product, coffee, would involve a premium, and quoted, it's about 20 to 30 cents. Now, $5 is already a lot on a college student budget, so imagine asking for even more money. Imagine asking for that fair trade coffee to be put on our tuition. There's already so many things that the budget is split up on. There's performing arts groups fighting for the money that they can't have to put on their production. There are people there are clubs in SJU who don't even have the money to put on the big events that they want to put on. There are new TVs being installed in all the classrooms. Why would we spend more money on coffee? Really? I understand that there's moral matters behind it, but speaking from a practical and business side of it, it just doesn't seem like a good move. In fact, it almost seems a little illogical. Now, yes, I understand that fair trade really should be done, but it just doesn't seem to work. In fact, it almost seems like a sinking ship at times. If you look at it, fair trade started all the way back in the 1960s, and if it was really successful at instilling morals into people, then why are there only 150 university campaigns active? And There are 2,000 four-year universities in the United States. So that's about 7.5% of universities in the past 50 years. And that's not even counting the tons of two-year institutions that it could also be done at. And finally, going back to that other argument about people choosing between fair trade and that Sydney experiment, if most people aren't focusing on fair trade and we have to shove it down their throats, people really aren't gaining any values from fair trade. They're not really understanding it. They're not really taking it in for what it should be. Instead it just goes like, oh, I'm just going to buy coffee to look like a good person, and that's not what it should be. So maybe there could be another way to implement fair trade, but the way it's looking for this university campaign, I just don't think it's a good idea.
Thank you very much for that speech. And now we'll hear from the second speaker for the proposition side.
So, like the second speaker mentioned, these people in the experiment were adults. They already had this ideal in their mind, they were already set in their ways. As college students, we are in that transition. So we still have the ability to change our ways, to learn more, to be able to spend our money where we feel it's needed or where we feel it's right. We have a lot of support from the school that is necessary to make those right decisions. And as St. John's, as a university that supports the Catholic mission, St. John's University really emphasizes the fact that students should be working towards social justice rather than focusing on themselves. There are a lot of campaigns or different organizations that work towards social justice, and we have a huge social justice minded here. So there are tons of people that are interested already and that are willing, if they have the opportunity, to purchase something that is fair trade over something that is not. And as for the experiment, I don't think it matches at all what we'd be doing with fair trade campaigns. We'd be just offering education and the different fair trade items to students. We wouldn't be forcing them to choose one. And I feel that, I can't speak for everyone, but for myself, if I'm offered something that is going to help someone rather than hurt someone, I would definitely choose that. As for the tuition cost and money, it wouldn't necessarily be raised because of fair trade items. So if there's fair trade coffee in Monty, it's not going to raise your tuition. It's just going to be incorporated into what you're already paying. And there's a difference between charging more or just changing the income distribution. So say fair trade coffee. Instead of giving the farmer less money and giving the corporation more money, you would be just changing the money. Say it's $5, and these aren't real numbers, but say a coffee is $5. Rather than giving $4 to a corporation and $1 to a farmer, we're giving $2 to a farmer and $3 to a corporation. That's the distribution method. So it wouldn't necessarily raise the price of the item. It would just be changing the income distribution.
Thank you very much for that speech. And now we call upon the second speaker for the opposition.
So when we think about fair trade, we kind of realize who are we speaking about, who's our target people we're trying to help. And it's really these farmers, poor farmers in these third world countries that they're trying to make a living, they're trying to improve their life. And within these countries, usually there's a lot of problems with the governments, a lot of problems with how things are run, usually with corruption and just overall just trying to get support. And America is very known to exploit all these countries along with the other first world countries like that. So essentially fair trade is saying to specific amount of farmers who get given these opportunities, hey, we will give you more money to grow your farms so you have a better living. But what about all the farmers in this one particular country, these countries, or the people who manufacture all these things? We have to understand that, cherry picking a few different groups of people, a few farmers and organizations, that it won't necessarily solve the entire problem of what we're having here, instead of just having a few that will succeed in that problem. And that will essentially mess the economy up in a lot of these other countries. We need a better solution to this would be more active work between both governments of the buyers and the sellers to actually work together to increase the living conditions of these countries. Instead of having separate organizations funnel money into certain farmers, certain groups, and stuff like that. And on our tuition and all that stuff, we have to understand that even though we are a not-for-profit organization, St. John's, the school is still run as a business. We still have a board of people having to make decisions on who to give money to and where our money is coming from. So so every year, our board of trustees, the people who are administrators, there's a year-to-year budget. They have to look through it. We have accountants, CPAs, people who are professional like this. So in the aspect that we do get this fair trade passed, we have to understand that we see that we might get an article in the Torch, we might get information, a school could put on a pedestal, we have to understand, but how about the next year and the year after that? Where is this money going to come from to fund all these fair trade things we have on campus, such as shirts in the bookstore, fair trade coffee and Monty's and stuff like that? Just because we are a fair trade school, we have to keep that up every single year. We have to keep implementing new and more fair trade things just to keep our status as a fair trade school. So if it loses its momentum or something like that, then how is it that we can make and have administrators know that we want to keep and continue this program every year just because it's convenient for them?
Fair trade campaigns doesn't say that you have to increase the amount of
Correct.
objects in the school, so.
Yes. So we don't have to increase it, but they do maintain that we are actively with fair trade use. So we have to keep submitting information every so often just to keep up with them, keep us a fair trade designated school. But the main point is we have to make sure that this is always funded. And with a school like St. John's, even though it's a not-for-profit, there's still going to be many obstacles with continuing this funding and making sure we get these vendors that support the fair trade, making sure that we implement these uses in the bookstore and all around campus that utilize fair trade. Because just in the next year, if we get a new vendor for something like that, we pretty much go out of fair trade. We're starting back from the beginning again of trying to be a fair trade school. So it's just going to be an endless cycle of us working with administration to keep the fair trade, which it might be for the cause the effect we're trying to get here will be very feasible again. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now we'd like to recognize the final speaker from the proposition team.
Hi, my name's Amber. So this debate has some clear questions today, right? So what exactly is fair trade, and does St. John's University have a moral obligation to become a fair trade designated campus? But on this side, we're telling you that there are deeper questions than just that. We're asking you to question what role exactly do institutions play in our society, and how do we best accomplish social change? So on this side, we come up to you and we talk to you about what exactly fair trade is and why it is so important that St. John's does become a fair trade designated institution. We're telling you that fair trade's main goal is to empower marginalized people and improve the quality of these workers' lives. So what is the link between that mission and that goal of fair trade designation and St. John's University? Well, we're telling you today about how St. John's University's mission statement is, as a Catholic and Vincentian university, is to serve the poor and look out for these marginalized groups in society. So we're telling you that St. John's becoming a fair trade designated institution simply is St. John's fulfilling that role and empowering students to serve others, especially those less fortunate than them. Okay, so then we have the opposition side come up here today, and they're telling you that this idea is simply not practical because of consumer responsibility. But we want to highlight that difference, that we're not talking about outside or adults. We're talking about college students, and this side, we're telling you that we believe in college students using their voice. We believe that college activism has worked time and time again, and it will continue to work, particularly in the case of fair trade. I'd like to bring up the specific example of the 1990s, the United Students Against Sweatshops. So what they did during the late 1990s was they'd educate and create young activists for the labor movement, right? Which sounds kind of similar to this fair trade movement. But we're talking that we saw real world change with them. They won things such as the minimum wage, and they're working towards living wage, and they supported unions. So we think that what we see on our side of the house is this notion for further change. So we're telling you that students can make a difference. That doesn't tie into this consumer responsibility. We're telling you that this, college activism does work, and it has worked, and it will continue to work on this side of the house. Okay? Yes.
So if St. John's University were to become a fair trade school, how would you guarantee that these products would be bought so that this benefit is passed on to the farmers, especially when tuition here is so high?
Okay, so we can tell you that the benefit would be passed on to these workers specifically because there's set standards when an institution becomes fair trade designated. So some of these standards are things that they ensure that there is no child labor in the worker conditions. They ensure safe working conditions for that group. They practice things like equality between genders and preservation of fragile ecosystems. So we're telling you that you'd actually see social change because to become a fair trade designated institution, you have to pass these set standards. So we're telling you exactly how that social change would happen. And we're telling you that this is such an important movement, and there's this sense of urgency on our side because these people who are in these working conditions don't have time to wait for a perfect solution that wouldn't impact the economy at all or anything. We're telling you that they need social change now, and we're telling you just how they'll get that social change is by St. John's University becoming a fair trade designated institution. We're telling you that St. John's students have that interest in social change to sustain this. We're telling you that we have things at this institution such as a university service day, a social justice minor, very active campus ministry. So the interest is there from students of this institution. So we're telling you that not only is this a great way to promote social change on campus, but that this could easily maintain itself here. And we're also talking to you about what exactly is social change. So we're telling you that St. John's becoming a fair trade designated institution will start a larger conversation. St. John's University has around 15,000 students, a little bit more than that, and we have campuses throughout New York City, Rome, and Paris. So we're telling you that each of us in this room, I'm sure, knows other students at other institutions and interacts with them. So we're telling you that we'll talk about the fact that we became fair trade designated, and that gives legitimacy to the movement, as more and more schools will then have the advantage to want to become one. Why are we talking about St. John's possibly becoming one? Because so many other institutions have done that. So we're telling you that if we become one, we're setting precedent for other universities, and we think that's exactly the role St. John's University wants to take on when compared to other institutions. So what exactly are we telling you? We're telling you that fair trade benefits the lives of the workers, and that St. John's University, as its mission is a Catholic Vincentian university to look out for the poor, has this moral obligation to serve the workers and help them get any social change for the better that would greatly improve their living conditions and improve their lives. So that is exactly why it is so urgent that St. John's University does become a designated fair trade institution. We're telling you that college student activism does work. We've seen it happen again where legislation has changed because of college advocates, and we're telling you that that can and will happen again in this case. And we're telling you that St. John's University, for all these reasons, must become a fair trade designated institution.
Thank you so much. And now we'll hear from the final speaker of the opposition side and the debate.
Fair trade, although a bright effort to change the world, is not going to create the change that it wants to create. We think that the rights of producers and farmers and ethical buyers will not change. Ethical consumption will not rise at St. John's University or any other university because fair trade will not produce the type of results that it claims it will. So first, before I give you an overview of what today's debate has been about, I just would like to respond to one statement made by the previous speaker. So Amber comes up here and tells you a lot about how students can change the world. We believe that. We think that students have the power to create advocacy and to create change throughout not only their nation and throughout the world. However, because fair trade has some key flaws in its structure, it's not going to create the change that it hopes to create. We think that all the efforts of St. John's University students and students at various universities, the change is not going to come through their advocacy because fair trade in itself is flawed. So we think that there are two or three points of clash in today's debate where each side really hits each other. We think that first it comes with ethical consumption, then it comes to pragmatics of how we would actually do this, and then tied into how it would relate specifically at St. John's University. So shifting over to ethical consumption, we think that the proposition team is very, very I can't think of the right word right now, but we think that they're very optimistic is the word I was thinking. They're very optimistic in the way that they think that people choose to buy things. We think that the decision-making calculus you use when you purchase something does not go as deep as they would want you to believe. And to give you an example of this, Forever 21, well, I'm going to make this interactive. How many of you have shopped at Forever 21 in your life? I hope a lot. Sweet, because this is going to be really relevant. So we think that Forever 21's conscious campaign is something that can shed light to the failures of that fair trade would lead to. Forever 21 has various items that they claim to be conscious and claim to have no conflict throughout their production chain. However, you may not have heard about Forever 21's fair trade. Forever 21's conscious campaign because it does not work. We think that people don't buy because of there's nobody along the line of how this product was made was hurt. We think that people buy based off how does it look nice? Is it expensive? How long can I use this product? We don't think that people buy things based off of ethical reasoning. We think that people make purchases purely off the basis that it is how big of an economic impact is it going to be to me? We don't think that you would, so St. John's University already has fair trade products at its vendors. However, we don't see that there's an extreme rise in the amount of fair trade products purchased here. Yes?
Did Forever 21 have a fair trade certified logo?
If you go on Forever 21's website, as I do weekly, you would see that there are numerous amounts of items that have the label conscious. So they're saying that this specific item is conscious. Buy this item because you would be an ethical person if you do. However, not many people buy this and the campaign is failing, which is sad because it shows that there's a lack of promotion for people to buy ethically. But the sad truth is we don't buy ethically, so there won't be any change if St. John's University becomes a fair trade campus because people aren't going to buy these products off the basis that they're ethical. So, I'm good. So moving on to the pragmatics of how this is going to be done, I mainly want to focus on the key issue that was alluded to a little bit earlier, in that there's going to be a price burden. We think that fair trade, although a great effort, is going to require that farmers are paid the price for their products and their labor, which we think is extremely right. We think that everybody should be paid the price for their labor and the products which they sell. However, this means that the spending that these companies who do client them is going to go up for these products. And this means since companies act within their own self-interest, they're going to act within their own self-interest and pass that spending burden onto the university. And you heard my partner just in 2 speeches ago speak about how St. John's University itself runs as a business. They're more concerned with making money than they are with producing their good or helping out students. Sorry to all the teachers in the room, I'm just doing this. So we think that the spending that was passed on to the schools is now going to be passed on to the students, and this is where it's going to hurt the most. We think that St. John's University's role is that, the specific keys to this debate on how it relates to St. John's University is that St. John's University is really expensive to go through. Even if you have the majority of your tuition covered here, you're still spending quite an amount, and everybody who's a student in here knows that. We think that food, especially if you live on campus, food here is extremely expensive already. We think that the meal plans at this university is extremely expensive already. And that to add this extra spending and this extra burden is not something that students can afford. So even if they were to act ethically in the way that they purchase, it's not going to be a possibility because we simply don't have the funds to actually shell out and help these people. I think that fair trade is an extremely smart endeavor, and I think that is something that we should look to in how we determine how we should pay workers and how we should buy products. However, this campaign is simply not going to work. Thank you.
So can we give a round of applause to our student debaters? So in a moment, I want to introduce some administrators and faculty who have been kind enough to donate their time and respond to the debate. I wanted to real quick give a shout out and thank you to our students who did this not for extra credit, just because I pressured them to. I'm not sure they knew about this. You can mix and match later, and even the opposition will get a fair trade chocolate bar. For now, you can figure out what your taste is and mix and match later. So again, thanks so much to Angelica, Alexia, Amber, Hugh John, who coming back, Joe Renz, and Michael. So we have a handful of faculty and administrators that are going to respond with a couple of thoughts, comments, questions. I think we'll start this way with Dr. Marie George, whose actual idea for the debate happened a year or two ago, and it's just taken a while to get it going. So I wanted to thank Dr. George and give her a chance to respond.
So I found the debate interesting on many points, and I congratulate you for carrying it on. I guess my big problem is the deep unasked question: how effectively does fair trade actually help the person who's doing the grunt work? Because the way the whole system is set up, there actually is no monitoring that extra cost is going to the farmer. It goes to a cooperative, and this is managed, and sometimes managers can take up this profit. The other thing, too, that wasn't mentioned is the cost that the retailer puts on fair trade products. One study done in Finland said if you buy fair trade coffee, the markup by the retailer is 80%. So you're paying, like, say you're paying twice as much for fair trade coffee. 80% of that is going to the retailer who's bragging this is fair trade coffee. 20% is going to the cooperative. So I think that I think that the opposition is underestimating the goodness of young people. I think that you do make choices based on ethics a lot of times, a lot more than I think the side gave you credit for. But I think that we have to look very carefully at these deeper issues. My last comment is I'm not fully understanding why the opposition thinks it's going to cost St. John's money. Because, for example, at Starbucks, if they offer fair trade coffee, you either buy it or you don't. It's not costing anyone more money. And as far as monitoring things, we, the volunteer fair trade committee, have been trying to find out if vendors are behind this or not. So it hasn't cost the university a dime so far. So that's another question I have.
George. So I think we're going to move on next to Victoria O'Keefe from Campus Ministries and Catholic Relief Services Ambassador. She heads that up. And a quick mention that Victoria brought a lot of fair trade goodies that are on the back table. I'll let Victoria.
Hello everyone. Sorry, just getting for a second. Great job by all the debaters. Really wonderful. Brought some great points. I'm very excited to be here today because this is something that I am passionate about and that I do care about. Please stop by the table in the back for some more facts, figures, information. There's some little samples of fair trade chocolate too, but just make sure you visit back there. One thing that gets me with fair trade is that it isn't this perfect solution to ending social inequalities. It's not the one magic bullet that's gonna raise people and eradicate poverty. that's not at all what fair trade is. But something that the founder of Equal Exchange, which is one of like the largest fair trade companies, shared, and I think it's a good little example, is that when you're building a house, you want to have a whole bunch of different tools, right? Like if you had just one hammer, you could build something, but it wouldn't be that great. You'd wish that there were different tools so you could do different things and build it even better. I think that's kind of the example right now that we have with fair trade, is that that's the hammer right now. Like this is one great solid example where we've seen the effects have been positive. It has raised people out of poverty. But again, there are flaws in its system inherently, and it could be grown and made better. But this is just one example of things that we can do on this side of the world that's going to have impact in the developing world. For a lot of these products, I agree also on like the price points. Things like Honest Tea, Ben & Jerry's, which we sell on campus that are fair trade goods. It's not so much, thinking like, oh, I'm not going to pay more to get this good just to help those people. It's really just continuing to buy what you love and you enjoy, and it's demanding from those vendors, demanding from businesses that they start living by these practices that fair trade upholds. Like my goal, my wish eventually would be that fair trade, the logo and this whole idea doesn't even exist. That's the way business should be in the first place. Because when we're talking about, these issues and spending 80 cents more for your cup of coffee, I mean, when you're not spending those 80 cents, you're essentially funding slavery, human slavery, child labor. I mean, this is the reality that goes behind all of our clothing, right? It goes behind everything that we buy, and that the university also, supports in a way. And so it not only goes to our mission of being Catholic and Vincentian, but also global. Our world is becoming so much more globalized. What we're doing essentially is affecting everybody in the rest of the world. Another huge part that didn't get brought up that I think feeds into fair trade is its effect on climate. Its practices that really holds climate and sustainability a key part of business in this world in which we're seeing increased pollution, climate change, and just all these other effects of bad business. And so, I think my whole goal is to continue working on making St. John's a fair trade campus. I do think it speaks to the mission of our university. It is something that we should continue to work towards. Is fair trade perfect? No, but it is something that we could do right here, right now, that will help better people in other parts of the world.
Again, remember on your way out, fair trade chocolates and facts and figures. If you want to educate yourself more, whether you fall on the pro or the opposition side. Next up, I want to introduce Paolo Tagatak, who's in the Office of Transfer Students and was instrumental in bringing fair trade soccer balls to a fair trade tournament here on campus.
Yeah, this is very weird for me just because I used to be part of the Ozanam Spouse program, so obviously social justice was there to the fullest. And when I left, I didn't think I would stick with the whole social justice theme, but you live with it, so you go through it. So I am part of the Fair Trade Steering Committee voluntarily, with my duties here, and also as a Ph.D. student in world history. But in terms for the debate, I think Lauren had mentioned earlier from the beginning. I think right now where fair trade is in the United States, there's a divide. So if you look up fair trade right now online, there's Fair Trade USA and Fair Trade America. You might wonder why. Because back in 2011, Fair Trade USA went out of Fair Trade International, which is where Fair Trade America is now. So that's why there is discrepancy in terms of whether or not are we really helping the most in need of this. So in terms of the debate, does it really matter whether or not a student would purchase something ethically or not? If the idea is there that eventually it would help, or they would figure out how it would better help those small farmers who need to make themselves as a co-op so that they can then compete with those bigger does it matter whether or not individuals will purchase it ethically? And for you guys, does it matter, we are doing this now, we're not a fair trade university. Campus ministry is doing it very well. Professors through academic service learning, they're doing their job in terms of making sure that students become ethical, making sure that one of those ways to do that is to figure out about and find out about fair trade. We're doing that now. Doesn't matter whether we become a fair trade university.
Thanks, Cal. Next up, Anna Zach from Academic Service Learning and Visa. And Anna has been very hopeful in often getting fair trade coffee to a variety of events, which has been helpful to us in hitting that goal of getting fair trade coffee to the race department.
We tried to get it for today, but unfortunately we can't serve it in this room, so, and all the other rooms on this floor were booked up, so I apologize for that. But, great job, first of all. Both groups brought up very valid points. And yes, fair trade is not perfect, but if we become a fair trade university, we are helping at least a small amount of people. We are helping to educate, and this is while we're here. We're helping to bring that word fair trade to the front, to let people notice the logo, to know what the logo looks like, so that when you go shopping, you can decide if that $1 or $2 difference, is something that you can do to help people out. Now you can find fair trade goods in stores like BJ and Costco and those stores that, help people save money can afford to bring those goods there. I buy my fair trade coffee in BJ's and, it tastes good. It's only a couple of dollars difference and I can afford to do that and I know what the logo looks like. But a lot of people will skip over it because they don't really know what the word fair trade means. So becoming a fair trade university, again, it allows us to educate people about what it is, what that cause is. And even if we're helping a very small amount of farmers, it still makes a difference. And as a Catholic and Vincentian university that has those morals and values of helping the impoverished and those in need, we should be interested in that cause and we should be promoting it.
Finally, we're up to Dr. Ann Galvin from the Department of Anthropology and Sociology. And Dr. Galvin has been with the Fair Trade Steering Committee since it officially started a couple years ago. She's been with us strong all along.
So I think both sides did a really good job presenting the issues. I think the con side had a harder job to an extent because the designation status is so easily attainable. So it's hard to argue against it because the downside is fairly minimal, I would say. I appreciate that you brought up this issue of who gets covered by fair trade because this is actually connected to what Paulo was saying about why the two organizations split as well, because the international organization wanted to focus on small cooperatives and the US-based organization wanted to be able to cover people who hired labor, and including corporations like Walmart and places like that that would need to source large amounts of products, right? So this is a really crucial conversation, actually. One of the things I wanted to say is that in my intro to anthropology class, I'm having students do some research on this on campus, and they're doing surveys of people by Starbucks or hanging around, interviewing them about their interest in fair trade. And the trend so far has been, first, they may not know what it is as opposed to free trade. So that's the first obstacle that needs to be jumped. But then students have reported back that essentially once they know about fair trade, they're more interested in actually participating in it. So my question also is, how do you know consumption hasn't increased on campus? That's something that would require some data to back it up, right? In terms of the strengths and weaknesses of fair trade, I think one of the strengths is that by branding fair trade, you are educating people. So if you're making people curious to ask questions, learning about the supply chain, that might have an effect that maybe is not directly attached to buying fair trade products. The downside from an anthropological perspective can be that it's been criticized as a capitalist solution to a capitalist problem. So essentially,
you're asking people to increase their participation in export activity as a way of improving their livelihood. Whereas there might be indigenous groups who would rather make their living in other ways, and you're maybe promoting a certain model of making a living that might be other options. So these are just some issues. Thanks for doing this.
So we've got at least 10 or 15 minutes, if not more than that,